Love. Now, this is a word that comes to mind when talking about work. Well, maybe not. But have you ever said how much you love a product or have loved a boss? If so, you realize that how we think about this four-letter word is complicated. And yet, we know it is a powerful force. That's why we're talking about it today, about what love is and why designing it into your work and workplaces is a powerful way to change your results. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping organizations and their leaders grow and lead more effectively and make a bigger difference across their teams, organizations, communities, and the world. If this is you, if you want to lead better and help leaders in your organization do the same, please accept my gift of an action guide summarizing the key individual and organizational next steps from our 2025 episodes. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/action guide. One word, action guide. If you're listening to this podcast, you may not know that we do these live stream them long before they make the podcast. So if you want to find out when those are happening and how you can get involved, just join one of our two groups where you can find that out, either on Facebook or LinkedIn. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. I'll get him here and then I'll introduce him and we will dive in. His name is Marcus Buckingham. I'm betting if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard of him before. For over 25 years, Marcus has been the world's leading researcher on strengths, engagement, and human performance. He began his career at Gallup and was the co-creator with Donald O. Clifton of Strengths Finder. He is the New York Times bestselling author or co-author of many books, including First, Break All the Rules, Now, Discover Your Strengths, and Stand Out 2.0, and also 9 Lies About Work and Love Plus Work. He has 2 Harvard Business Review's most circulated industry-changing cover articles and has been the subject of in-depth profiles on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Forbes, Fortune. You get the idea. He's even been on Oprah. Today, we're talking about his newest book, which as of this live conversation is not even out yet. It's called Design, Love, and How to Unleash the Most Powerful Force in Business. Marcus, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. That's quite the introduction. Happy to be here around this table.
I called your mom and said, tell me what I should say. No, I'm just teasing. Listen, I'm so glad that you're here and I enjoyed the book and I'm happy for us to have this conversation. So you've written a bunch of stuff and you just told me before we started, you've been thinking about this topic for 3 years. So why this book?
Well, I'm a data geek by training and by disposition. And when you look at the outcomes that we all want as leaders, when you look at extreme positive outcomes in terms of productivity, resilience, loyalty from our people, or when you look at repeat visits or advocacy, word of mouth from our customers, and you look at the extreme positive versions of that, and you ask yourself, well, how did we get those outcomes? You just make 2 discoveries. One of which I pushed against, shame on me, but I pushed against it for 20 years. You make 2 discoveries. The first is, if you want to drive those outcomes, most leaders' knee-jerk reaction is to try to be directive in order to get those outcomes. So as a leader, you might set goals and give feedback and try to drive performance in that way. Or with your customers, you'll set pricing or you'll define the product's features and benefits and loyalty programs. And those directive methods work temporarily. But if you want to know what sustainably drives those outcomes, well, you have to go upstream. Experiences drive behaviors, drive outcomes. So if you want sustainably productive outcomes, you've got to become expert at designing extremely positive experiences. Experiences live inside the person, and that's what drives their behavior to change, and that's what drives their outcomes to change. So what that means for leaders is you're an experience maker. It's not like you are one or not. It's like you are one. The question is whether you're a skilled one or not. So that's the first big discovery, is that if you're a leader, you're an experience maker. If you don't quite know what I mean by that, that's why I wrote the book, because it's like experience making is a skill. You can have experience intelligence or not, but if you don't have much of it, we can help you have more of it. And then the second big discovery, frankly, is if you unpack those experiences, Kevin, the word people use to describe them, if you're looking at extreme positive experiences of customers or employees, the word people naturally reach for is love. They'll say, I love working on that team. I love that movie. I love that leader. I love that company. I love. And initially, it looks like it's a careless exaggeration of the word like or something. But actually, it's a spontaneous, top of mind reaching for a particular word to describe an extreme positive. And for me, I kept hearing it and I kept changing it as a slightly uptight, skeptical British researcher. I kept changing the word to engagement or passion or joy or satisfaction or even strengths, because those words are more palatable to a business audience. But that's not actually what people say. What people say is love. And so in the end, you go, oh, love's the most powerful driver of all productive human behavior. Love is. And if we as leaders can't even talk about it, then we can't talk about the most powerful driver of anything good that happens in business. That's weird. It's the most
And we
powerful
certainly
force in
can't
movement.
create it if we can't talk about it.
Exactly. So that's why I wrote the book, was going, you know what, Marcus? It's time to just shut up and listen to what people are actually saying. As a researcher, that's what you should do anyway. They're saying love. What do they mean by that? Because it drives their behavior. What do they mean by that? And that's where the book came from, going, okay, come on, in a loveless world, in an increasingly loveless world, how do you design love into things? Because it doesn't mean just soft. It's not a coating. Love's an ingredient. You can design it in or you can design it out. And obviously the best leaders know how to design it in.
100%. One of the things you talk about in the book, I was trying to find a place that, as you're chatting a little bit about it, but you talked about this idea of what I'm going to call the law of the fives. I don't think that's what you actually called it, but it's the idea that we often don't think about the real extremes, or we try to lump stuff together, kind of like what you were just saying. Talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's the extension, it's the data extension of what you just said.
Yeah. So for those of your listeners who are really into data, I think you'll get this. We think that the relationship between experiences and outcomes is linear. So we think that if you've got a scale of 1 to 5 defining an experience, we think that if you move a 2 to a 3, like a below average experience to average, or an average experience to above average, like a 3 to a 4, you get the same amount of performance increase or outcomes increase. And if there's an awful lot more experiences that are in the 2s and the 3s, or the 3s and the 4s, it just makes sense to ignore the 5s and try to move everything a little bit to the right. You take the grumpy employees and make them a little less grumpy. You get the kind of grumpy, upset customers and make them a little less upset. That just all seems so sensible. You move the 2s to the 3s, and actually we combine the 4s and the 5s, Kevin, and we call that percent favorable, or top 2 box. And we think that our whole strategy should be move the 2s to the 3s and the 3s to the 4, 5s. But unfortunately, the data doesn't support that at all. The relationship between experiences and outcomes is actually what's called curvilinear, which means it's a hockey stick curve. Practically, that means if you move a 2 experience for your customers to a 3, you don't get any behavior change at all. If you move a 3 experience of your employees to a 4, they were average and now their experience is slightly above average. Okay, that doesn't drive any of their behavior at all. Doesn't drive productivity, doesn't drive loyalty, doesn't drive advocacy. When you think about a scale of 1 to 5, 5s are the only, if you move somebody from a 4 to a 5, it is only then that you can start predicting what their behavior is going to be. So when push comes to shove, 4s are 3s, not 5s. 4s are 3s, 3s are 2s, 2s and 1s. When it comes to the data, the world's really binary. There's 5s, and everything else on your scale you should see as not a 5. So we should never use top 2 box ever again, because you're lumping things that are completely categorically different. We should never use net promoter score. Net promoter score is fundamentally built on the idea of linearity, as though moving a 4 to a 5 or a 5 to a 6 is the same thing as moving a 9 to a 10. It isn't. Whenever we've got a scale of experiences, 5s or 10s or whatever the extreme of your scale is, drives behavior. Everything else doesn't. And that for leaders, remember, the job of a leader is one. You've got one job as a leader: change behavior. You're trying to change people's behavior, whether it's customers or employees. Well, if you're in the business of behavior change, you've got to know what the driver of behavior change is. And moving 3s to 4s doesn't do it. Moving 8s to 9s doesn't do it. You've got to somehow create experiences where people go 5. That's what drives their behavior. Sorry, I know the bar's high, but the data is the data is the data. If you're not holding yourself accountable to what you just called the law of fives, if you're not curious about the fives, you'll never drive sustainably productive behavior from customers or employees. That's a wake-up call.
So you talk, I think the core of the book is about, maybe not the core, one of the cores of the book are what you call the 5 feelings of love, because we have this complicated thinking about this word. And so now we're going to use it in the workplace because it's the driver of behavior change. We need to talk about the feelings that it is, or the types of it, if you would. So let's talk about those briefly, and go from there. And you call them the 5 feelings of love, Marcus.
Yeah. Well, so if you look at the fives, whether it's customers or employees, and you just ask yourself, how did they get there? They're saying, I love that. I love that team. I love that movie. So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, gosh, first of all, what do they mean by love? Because we use it in all these different contexts. I love those socks. I love my mom. Can it possibly mean the same thing? And yet it does drive behavior. So although there's obviously as many different definitions of the word love as there are people alive, there must be something common about it because it drives behavior. When you really push on it, what you find there, Kevin, is that we reach for that word when we encounter an experience, whether it's a pair of socks, or whether it's a leader, where we feel that we can flourish. So love is it's like a synonym for the feeling of being more fully yourself over time. We humans go through life wrapped up, armor plated like an armadillo because the world's scary. But inside, we know we've got something inside of us that wants to come out. We want a life in which we can express the uniqueness of us in some way, shape, or form. So any experience, no matter how trivial, like a pair of socks, or how meaningful, like a mentor, where we get to take off one of those plates of armor and we get to express something, a little bit, it could be the smallest thing, but where we get to express some part of ourselves, that plate of armor comes off, and the word we reach for to describe that is love, because we want to have a world in which we don't go through it, all of it, as an armadillo. We want to express, get to 95 years old on the porch, and we're thinking, you know what, I lived a life where I got a chance to express me. Humans love that, and we reach for experiences like that. So if you back up, what you're trying to do as a leader is build experiences for customers and employees where they can do that. It could be in the smallest ways or the most significant ways, but you're getting people a chance to take the armor off. Well, if you reverse engineer that, you bump into 5 feelings. You don't bump into chaos. You bump into 5 distinct feelings. It's almost like you build love one feeling at a time, and you can't hurry it. Sorry, Phil Collins or whoever the original, you can't hurry love, right? The first feeling is control, which sounds odd, but it's not control over other people. It's control over self. So the first feeling you want people to have in an experience is, and they're asking themselves, what is this world and how does it work? So anything you can do, like even, Chick-fil-A going, we're closed on Sunday. That is a loving thing to do because it gives people clarity about the world that they're entering into. Southwest Airlines in the past saying there is no seat assignment. You just get a letter and a number. That's it. Some people may hate that, by the way, but it's clear. It gives you control over the world you're moving into. So first feeling is control. Second feeling is harmony, where basically the person is going, does this experience know what I'm feeling and does it care? When we feel as though an experience somehow is communicating that it knows what we're feeling and that it cares, we lean in. When it doesn't feel that, it feels jarring. We found nurses who gave painless injections, and we kept looking at, well, what are they doing to give people the sense that their pain is less? Is it the injection technique? Is it their tone of voice? Turns out it's nothing to do with that. They all said the same thing right before they put the needle in. They all said, this is going to hurt a little bit. I'll try to make it hurt as little as I can. And somehow in just saying what you're feeling as the patient, you end up sharing the pain somehow. Whenever we bump into an experience where you show me, you know what I'm feeling, wherever you might want to move me to, you got to meet me before you can move me. So harmony, that's harmony. The third feeling is significance. At some point in the experience, we want the experience to say, I know what your story is, and I'll change something because of it. So the whole it dependsness of the experience. I know what your story is, and this is what's going to change as a result of it. I don't want you to start with that. I don't want you to start with individualization. I want you to start with rules. I like rules and control are good. Part of love, actually, as every parent knows. But at
Right.
some point, I'm going to want to feel significant. That means that you got to figure out what my story is and that you care about it. The fourth feeling is warmth of others. We humans hate experiences where we feel isolated. So we are always in any experience, at some point in the experience, looking around going, who's with me and how can they help? Who's with me? How can they help? There's so many opportunities that companies have to maximize that, and we don't. I own a Jeep, and Jeep's got this happening organically. And Jeep, because they don't really take love seriously, have done nothing with it. I get ducks all over my Jeep. I've got a Wrangler, and at some point, some Canadian lady decided that she was having a bad day, so she put a rubber duck on the hood of another Wrangler with a little note on it saying, "There's sunshine around the corner." And for those of you with Jeeps, you'll know what I'm talking about here. It
Well, if you
caught
pay
on.
attention to people when you're driving on the road and you see Jeeps, they got ducks across the dash.
I know. And does Jeep do anything with that? No. It's crazy to me that they've got this naturally organic warmth of others and no one's maximizing it. The last feeling is growth. Love is a forward-facing emotion. If you love someone, you know they're never done. They're always in a state of they're going to have to wake up tomorrow and face the world again. So what people want in an experience is how will you help me be a little more capable tomorrow? So if you can imagine as a leader, you've got a sequence of 5 feelings: control, harmony, significance, warmth of others, growth. That's a blueprint for getting people to that place of fives. That's a blueprint for getting people to go, I love that. If you can look at each of those 5 feelings sequentially, and it is a sequence, Kevin, you can't start with growth because the armor's still on. Each one of those feelings is like one plate of armor coming off. And so the whole book really is about, well, how do the best leaders or the best companies design for each of those 5 feelings? Not easy, but it's very hard if you're not even trying.
Yeah, and the statement that you just made, you can't start with growth. I think there are organizations that try to start with growth, right? They want to develop their leaders, they want to develop their teams, and they kind of go there. And you've just described one of the reasons why so much of those investments don't go so well. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons.
Yeah, I mean, one of the stories I tell in the book is I was asked to give a speech at a very high end spa. So I was like, oh, I don't normally go to spas, but I'll go there. And I think it was Canyon Ranch in Austin, and there was a whole load of people at that spa that didn't look like everybody else. They were all about 27, 28, 29. They didn't know each other. They weren't with their families. They weren't with their spouses. They were by themselves. And they just seemed out of place because it's like, so in the end, my curiosity got the better of me. And I was like, hey, where are you all from? Why don't you know each other? But anyway, it turns out they were all from, I won't mention the name of the firm, but they were all from a professional services firm. And the person said, we get told when we're hired that if we stay for 3 years or until we make senior manager, once we do, we get given a prize. And the prize is to pick any canyon ranch in the country and go and spend 3 days at the canyon ranch. And if we stay for 3 years, we get this prize. And I was like, that's cool. That's great. Does it work? And they went, yeah, of course it works. That's why I'm here. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. So what happens now then? Now that you've gone? He goes, well, now we're free to go. I'm like, what? He goes, now we're free to leave. We've been held hostage by this growth thing that we're doing for this, but now that we're done with it, we're gone. So this poor professional services firm, I mean, it's fine, but they'd spent all this time and energy and money to get people to stay for 3 years. So they tried to make people feel a feeling of growth, but because they hadn't done the first 4 feelings intentionally, all these people were now, quote unquote, free to leave. They haven't built an experience where people went, I flippin' love working here. Instead, they'd done something mechanistic and functional and given people a growth prize as though that was the way to get people to be sustainably productive. Well, love doesn't work that way. Love doesn't work backwards. You got to start with control, not growth. It's like banks that try to teach you financial literacy, but they haven't done anything to attend to your need for control, harmony, significance, warmth of others. And so it bounces off of us. I call this in the book, experience intelligence. There is an intelligence that the best leaders have for experience design. And what I just described there, the professional services firm is a jolly good firm, but it's experientially unintelligent to do something to get people to feel a feeling of growth when you haven't done the stuff that's foundational to that. It means in the end, you don't change the behavior you're trying to change, which in this case is getting people to stay.
Well, and as you were telling that story, the word that kept coming to my mind was at the end, and I'm guessing a bit from the way you told the story, is that those people at the spa, the whole thing felt hollow. That's the word that I kept hearing in my head, was hollow, which is a far cry from anything that we would consider love.
Yes, and that's such a great word. If you think about companies that have done this really well, and I am not suggesting the Walt Disney Company does everything perfectly, but if you can imagine a situation where at some point somebody says, we want our characters to hug the children, and there's some general counsel somewhere who goes, we're not, we're not getting adults to hug kids. But of course, in the end, Walt Disney goes, no. We're going to hug the kids. What is the loving way to tell all of our cast members how to hug a kid? And out comes from that very serious thought process about, well, how do you do that? You think about control and harmony, and they just marinated in those first two feelings. How do we give the kid the feeling of control? And how do we meet the kid exactly where they're at so that the whole experience feels loving? If we're not careful, the whole thing will feel hollow. And so they come up in the end with, some of your listeners may know this, the Disney hugging rule, which is what they teach all the cast members. And it's simple. It's you don't stop hugging until the kid stops hugging. And that's the hugging rule. It gives the kid the feeling of control, and it meets the kid exactly emotionally harmoniously where they're at. It's a beautifully simple execution that fits perfectly with those first two feelings. Contrast that with what Mike Nichols right now is doing at Starbucks, where he's come in the past at Starbucks. The baristas used to write your name right on the cup and some little word, and because it was
Hard,
all
yeah,
exactly, and it was organic. It was a bit like the ducking. It was because Howard Schultz had created a world, talking about that first feeling of control, he called it the third place. And we're in love with this third place, and that's what we're all about. And you, the customer, you were given a feeling of control as you walked into that world. You knew what to expect. And the words on the cup were kind of a little organic manifestation of that third place. Well, now Mike's come in fresh from Chipotle, where he was before Taco Bell, and said directively to all the baristas, thou shalt now write words on a cup. And it's directive, it's functional, it's, to use your word, it's hollow, because it doesn't start with, like, as a customer, you're like, I don't know why I'm getting this. Didn't used to get this. Now all of a sudden I'm getting this. I got a cup the other day, Kevin, where they'd just written words on a cup. They'd written the words on a cup because it was a passive-aggressive, hollow, mechanistic, standard operating procedure. It was experientially unintelligent. And of course, in the end, you might go, well, so what? Well, I'm sorry. The thing that Disney does leads to more love, and the thing that Starbucks does leads to less love. And if you want to think intelligently about business outcomes as a leader, you'll take love seriously because it drives productive human behavior, in this case, customers. It's like, this isn't sweet love and apple pie. It's right. Like, that's why I called the book, Love is the Most Powerful Force in Business. You better have a strategy for it. Yeah, unleash the most powerful force in business. And it gets really 2-foot level stuff, Kevin. It's like, here's a Disney hugging rule, which has the love designed in. And here's a Starbucks words on a cup rule, which has love designed out. And these things are massively different in terms of their business outcomes.
There's so much that we could get into. We were talking with Marcus Buckingham, the author of the new book, Design Love In, How to Unleash the Most Powerful Force in Business. And we can't get to all that's here. But I'm really glad, Marcus, that as we were just chatting, you made it clear to those who are now going to want to go buy a book that this is thinking about both designing love into the experiences inside the organization, but also outside the organization. And we don't have time to dive into either one of those much more. But there's one other thing I really wanted to get to, because you talk about it in the book, and it's almost obligatory in 2026, if you're having a podcast and you're talking about business, you're talking about leadership, that somehow you ought to talk about AI. And you talk about it in the book, and you talk about the connection, or what the connection can be between love and AI. So let's just take a minute or two on that before we start to wrap up, because I think it's important, and it's one of the many things that people are struggling with so much right now, which is why the book is so important.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about an experience continuum, on the far left, you've got like exploitative experiences that nobody wants. On the far right, you've got experiences that people love, which drive their behavior. And so any system or any initiative that you bring into your company or your team, you've got to ask yourself a simple question. Does it move the experience more to the right, or does it move it more to the left? Are you designing more love in with this, or are you designing more love out? And AI is a super interesting one because you can see examples of where it's clearly bringing more love in. Like when I think about AI, there's parts of AI I love. It makes me smart. It saves me time. It gives me an opportunity to find connections that I wouldn't otherwise find. I love it the way I could love any inanimate thing that enables me to express a bit of myself. I love it the same way I love a pair of socks. I mean, it's like it enables me to flourish in some way. So I can love it. So in that context, I think it clearly can move us to the right. If we're not careful, though, we haven't asked the other side of that question, which is, well, I can love it. Can it love me? So, for example, if you bring an AI process into your customer service experience, have you moved the love bar, if you want, to the left or to the right? Have you designed more love in or designed it out? And the question there for us is, when we bump into an AI bot that is very smart and knows a lot about a lot of things, is it going to create an experience for me where I go 5? Is it not 1 to 3? I mean, clearly we've all had experiences with customer service reps where they're really grumpy and they sludge us and the whole thing's awful. So maybe an AI is better than that for sure. Gets us to a 3. But can AI actually make us more likely to go, I love that? On the surface, we need to be careful because AI doesn't know experiences. AI isn't an experience maker. AI doesn't know what the word flourishing is. It never can and never will. AGI will never, ever have an AI understand what the word shame means, or fear, or anxiety, all the stuff that we humans feel that we bond over. AI will never feel that. And we need to be careful with AI that we don't overclaim that it can create 5s. It can create, no, it can reduce 1s. But in terms of experience creation, we just need to be clear that there are some things that it doesn't do very well, and it never will. It's like a B player, maybe a C player. We just need to be careful. And
So we design that into the process, don't make it the process.
yes, exactly. We can have it be so that you can love it because it helps you do things. But if it becomes the way in which we engage through that experience, then it actually is trying to do something it's not designed to do. Now, look, you could take those 5 feelings, and in the book, that's what I say. An AI is simply an optimization engine. You can optimize AI for anything, for any outcome. Well, one of the things that we currently do not optimize it for is those 5 feelings. We don't optimize it for love. We haven't designed it to create control, harmony, significance, warmth of others' growth. If we did, if we really thought through, okay, well, how would you design it so that the questions it asked you and the guidance it provided you was sequenced in a way that fit with us humans, then we are more likely to have AI be an on-ramp to a loving experience. I would still say, Kevin, that it can't be the full deliverer of that loving experience because it doesn't know from love. And love's the most powerful driver of anything productive that we humans do. Any leader that doesn't understand that just shows that they don't understand that. It's not that it's not true.
Right.
So AI needs to be carefully thought about in terms of the limit and the extent of what it's fit for purpose. Regardless of AGI, if that ever were to come about, it's still never going to have the quintessence of empathy for those 5 feelings. It could be designed for those, but it can't be the full deliverer of those ever. And we all, as intelligent business leaders, we need to know how to unpack that so we don't end up putting AI processes in place, which frankly design love out. Our investors don't want us to do that because that reduces the value of the business.
Yep.
That's sorry, but that's stupid. Don't do that.
So Marcus is, other than buying the book, what would be one thing that you would, you're in the ear literally right now of leaders, right? At different levels in organizations. What's what's one thing that you would urge them to do first?
I think there's so many things that one can do at the 10,000-foot level and the 2-foot level. Like the Disney hugging rule is at the 2-foot level. It's just a simple mechanism for how do you design love into an interaction. Okay. At the 10,000-foot level, it's, hey, Delta Airlines, do you really want to change your frequent flyer program so that it rewards people using your credit card versus rewards people from flying? Do you really want to do that strategically? So it sort of hits at all levels. But the first thing, this is what Peter Drucker always used to say, right? What are you going to do differently on Monday? So even if you don't read the book, what should you do differently on Monday? You should ask yourself 2 questions every single Monday. Will whatever we're doing this week get more customers to love our company? And whatever we're doing, will it get more people to love working here? Love the company, love working here. Our company is more valuable, our team is more effective, our people are more productive when I answer those questions intelligently. Not everything I'm doing will drive both of those, but if you don't use those as your primary lens through which you
Right.
decide on what to do, you are driving the value of your team, your business, your leadership reputation, everything. You're driving it down. The best leaders are incredibly intelligent designers of experiences people love. There's just no simpler way to say it, Kevin. And that's why they're so good at driving sustained behavior change. What we see a lot of, one of the people I profile in the book is Josh D'Amaro. And I profiled Josh D'Amaro before he became the chairman of Disney. This is while he was still in a lower position where he was doing great work, but he wasn't yet anointed by the board. I am so gratified, actually, that the board, because they had a number of different candidates they could have picked. Josh happens to have a ton of experience intelligence, some of which I describe in the book, and is a totally different leader than some of the machismo, chest thumpery voices and actions that currently pass for leadership. And the fact that Disney went, wait a minute, we're going to promote someone who is deeply experientially intelligent at the 2-foot level, at the 50,000-foot level, who can redesign a ride for $40 million in a way that is experientially intelligent and can somehow create a relationship with cast members, which gets them to feel super bonded with you, even though you're 47 levels higher in the hierarchy. And he can do everything in between. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's got a lot of experience intelligence, which I play out in the book. I'm so happy that a board like Disney went, well, of all these different other leaders, we're going to pick this one. Because I think today's world, the data would show, we are incredibly distrustful. More than in the last 80 years of measuring this, we don't trust big business, big media, big pharma, big government. Less than 15% of us trust any one of those institutions I just mentioned. We're living in a trustless, loveless world. And some of that is clearly a function of the way that we have allowed leaders to lead. And what I hope this book does is it takes a stand for the Josh D'Amaros of the world, going, no, there's a way more intelligent way to lead. And the way you do it is you engage intelligently with that word love, because that's how humans drive sustainably productive human behavior. If you're interested in sustainably productive human behavior, you should be interested in what Josh is interested in. And those 2 questions, more customers love us tomorrow, more people love working here tomorrow, they should be the filter through which you decide how to do anything as a leader.
And I'll just say this, when we do that, I said at the start of the show, this show is about helping make leaders help make the world a better place fundamentally. And doing what we've just described, what you just described, does that. It also happens to create competitive advantage because most won't.
But I think it's a huge point there, Kevin. Love is your unfair competitive advantage. There are other short-term mechanistic ways for you to drive profitability, for sure. And these days, many leaders are using AI as their excuse for slashing and cutting their workforces in order to drive a short-term margin or a short-term Wall Street goal, which is okay. That will always happen. And there'll be companies that forever do that. But if your company wants to be different, and by different, I mean, if it wants to build love in the heart of your customers and your employees, then you can design it in. And if you do design it in, which is not easy, but it's incredibly productive. If you do design it in, then as you say, Kevin, you'll have a sustainable competitive advantage because it will live in the hearts of tens of thousands of people. That's what changes their behavior. And if you're doing that every day, a little bit every day and a lot over time, you end up building a company that feels incredibly different from the perspective of the two constituencies that matter most, your customers and your employees.
Absolutely.
Ooh, that's magic.
Yep. So, Marcus, before we go, a question I ask every one of my guests is, what are you reading these days?
So the inspiration for this book actually came from, well, it came from a lot of deep data and research, but the inspiration of the book was by a chap called Theodore Zeldin. The book's called An Intimate History of Humanity. And for those of you who like books that are unpacking the human condition, Theodore Zeldin, Zeldin, An Intimate History of Humanity. It's exactly what it describes. Mostly when you read history, it's like, and I love the book Sapiens, for example, or the book Guns, Germs, and Steel. These are big swath books of how history plays out in the broadest, biggest terms, which are great. An Intimate History of Humanity is all about the tiniest details of the human condition and how those details have changed in terms of how we think about relationships, or how we think about love, or how we think about sex, or how we think about food. And so if you're not interested in any of that, do not read this book. But An Intimate History of Humanity is this really detailed 2-foot level discussion of the human condition. And for me, it's one of the best books I've ever read, and I always go back and keep reading it.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes, as well as a link to Design Love In, Marcus's new book. Where do you want to point people, Marcus? Where do you want to, if people want to be connected with you, like, where do you want to point them in any way, shape, or form?
Well, for those that are listening now, go to designlovein.com. Because we've in concert with Harvard Business Review, we've created a discovery series that you get for free with your pre-order. So it's a 10-part series, 10 minutes per episode of the discoveries that led to this book. So designlovein.com. If you're listening on the podcast, I started a company called Love That, which is simply about how do you actually build your experience intelligence as a leader. And so that if you're really interested in this, in building this competency, the kind of capability that the Disney board saw in Josh D'Amaro, then please go to lovethat.com and you'll see, it's just lovethat.com. And you'll see what I'm trying to do beyond the book to create a way for you to build that capability in your life as a leader.
We'll have links to both of those in the show notes as well. Not to be a big surprise, I'm sure, but make sure you go check that out before you finish. Before we go, though, I have a question for all of you who are watching or listening. It's the question I ask you every single episode. It's simply this: now what? What action will you take? And Marcus mentioned this a bit ago. You could ask those two questions. Well, what will we do this week that will make customers love us more? What will we do this week that will make our team love working here more? He said it better than I did, but that's basically it. But there's 100 other things that you may have taken from this. It's not my job to tell you what that should be. It's my job to encourage you to ask that question for yourself and then to take action on your answer. Thanks for being here. Marcus, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kevin. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
It's my pleasure. And so everybody, I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching, listening, so you don't miss any future episodes, because we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.